My son laughed. For Christmas, you better not even think about showing up. By dawn, I was on a first-class flight to Paris with a contract that wrote them out of my will. There are days when you discover that the love you thought was eternal was just an illusion you'd built to survive. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 58 years old, and until 3 months ago, I lived in a 2-story house in Oak Park, Illinois. A house I bought brick by brick, selling specialty cakes out of my kitchen for 15 years. A house where I raised my son, Daniel, all by myself, where I sewed costumes late at night to pay for his private university tuition, where I saved every single dollar thinking that one day he would be grateful. That November morning, I was in the kitchen preparing my famous Thanksgiving brisket, the same recipe I'd made every year since Daniel was 5, with the secret spice rub I'd perfected over the years and the specific hickory wood chips my close friend Brenda brought me from her trips down south. My hands, stained with paprika, trembled slightly as I worked the spices into the meat on the butcher block my mother had left me. The phone rang at 11:15 in the morning. It was Daniel. "Mom." His voice sounded different, colder than usual. In the background, I could hear the big screen TV I had given him last year. When he asked to borrow $5,000 for an emergency, he never explained. "Daniel? Honey, how are you? How's my little Sophia?" I asked, wiping my hands on the apron embroidered with my late husband Robert's initials. There was a long pause. Too long. The kind of silence that braces you for a punch to the gut. "Look, Mom, Jessica and I have been talking." Jessica, his wife of 8 years, the woman who never spoke to me directly, who always found some flaw in my gifts, who complained that my house smelled like old people every time they visited, 3 times a year, at most. Talking about what, Daniel? Well, this year we're going to host Thanksgiving here at our place, with Jessica's parents, her brothers, just something intimate, for family. The brisket knife slipped from my hands. The sound of the steel hitting the slate tile floor echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. The scattered spices looked like little open wounds on the dark stone. "For family?" I repeated, feeling the air sucked out of my lungs. "Yeah, Mom, family. It's just that, well, sometimes you say things that make Jessica uncomfortable. And this year we want it to be special for Sophia, without any tension, you know?" No, I didn't know. I didn't understand how the son I nursed for 2 years, the one I held when he had a fever, the one I defended when the other kids at school made fun of his worn-out shoes, was now telling me I was a source of tension in his life. "Daniel, I'm your mother. Sophia is my granddaughter. I've been planning her Thanksgiving outfit for 2 weeks. I even embroidered a little dress for her. Mom, please don't make this harder. Jessica thinks it's for the best, that you've done your job as a mother, and now it's our turn to build our own family. Done my job, as if I were a housekeeper being retired after years of service." In the background of the call, I heard Jessica's voice, clear as crystal. "Tell her not to push it, Daniel. She already raised her kid. She had her turn. Don't let her ruin dinner with her resentful comments." The phone slipped from my trembling hand. I fell into the wicker chair where I had spent years peeling apples for the cake business that kept a roof over our heads. The same chair where I waited up for Daniel when he came home late from work, where I'd fallen asleep so many times waiting for calls that never came. I picked the phone up off the floor. Daniel was still talking. "Mom, are you there? Look, we'll talk after the new year, okay? We'll take you out for a nice lunch somewhere." "Daniel," I whispered, but he had already hung up. I just sat there, surrounded by scattered spices, with the brisket half prepared and my heart shattered. Outside, on my quiet street, I could hear the sounds of families getting ready for the holidays. Carol Gable, my neighbor, was yelling for her grandkids to come help her with the Christmas lights. Mr. Henderson was testing the speakers for his annual holiday music display, and I was alone, utterly alone. I walked into the living room, where I had framed photos of Daniel from the time he was a baby until his college graduation. Daniel in the arms of his father, who died when he was 12. Daniel in his first Little League uniform, which I bought by selling extra cakes for a month. Daniel on his wedding day, smiling next to Jessica, who had forbidden me from wearing the burgundy dress I'd bought for the occasion because it clashed with the color palette of the ceremony. On the coffee table was the scrapbook I had been making for my granddaughter, Sophia. Hundreds of photos, drawings, and letters I wrote, but could never give her because Jessica felt it was too intense for a grandmother to write letters to a 4-year-old girl. That day, for the first time in my 58 years, I felt what it meant to be truly alone in the world. I didn't know that phone call was just the beginning of a nightmare that would force me to discover what I was really made of. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the queen-sized bed I had shared with Robert, stroking his pillow, which still held the faintest trace of his Old Spice cologne. I closed my eyes, and the memories hit me like furious waves crashing against a cliff. Daniel was 8 when Robert died of a massive heart attack at the auto shop where he worked. On a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, he collapsed among the tools he loved so much, and I was left a widow with a boy who asked every night when Dad was coming back from heaven. I got up and went to the closet. In the back, behind my Sunday dresses, was the shoebox where I kept all the receipts, all the invoices, all the proof of a lifetime of sacrifices that Daniel seemed to have forgotten completely. I opened it with trembling hands. The first paper I found was the hospital bill from when Daniel broke his arm at age 10. $2,500 I didn't have. I had to pawn my wedding rings, the only real gold I owned, to pay for the x-rays and the cast. Below that was a receipt from St. Patrick's Academy, the private school. Tuition payment after tuition payment for 12 years. $1,000 a month that I didn't have, but that I managed by baking cakes from 5 in the morning until 11 at night. My hands became so chapped from the flour and the cold early mornings that they looked like the bark of a dry tree. "Why can't you just send me to the public school like everyone else?" Daniel had asked me once, when he was 14, and was embarrassed that I came to pick him up on an old bicycle instead of in a car. "Because you deserve the best, honey. Because you're going to be someone important in life," I answered, even though every month was a brutal battle to come up with that tuition money, which cost me tears and sleepless nights. I kept sorting through the papers. There it was, the receipt for his college graduation, a business degree from DePaul University that cost me 4 years of my life. A total of $150,000 that I scraped together not just by selling cakes, but by cleaning offices on weekends, ironing other people's clothes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and even babysitting for my friend Brenda when she worked nights. I remember his graduation day perfectly. I had bought a navy blue dress at a thrift store, had done my hair in an elegant updo, and sat in the front row with a smile so wide it made my face ache. When they called his name and he walked across the stage for his diploma, I cried my eyes out from pure joy. After the ceremony, Daniel came over to me with 3 of his classmates, well-dressed young men with expensive watches and shoes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Mom, these are Rodrigo, Santiago, and Patrick. We studied together," he said, but there was something in his voice, a shame that pierced my heart like a knife. "A pleasure to meet you, ma'am." "Your son is very smart," Rodrigo said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes as he glanced at my thrift store dress. "Thank you, sweetie." "Daniel was always a hard worker," I replied, feeling how my thick Chicago accent sounded next to these boys who spoke like news anchors. They went off to celebrate without me. Daniel told me they were going to a very exclusive restaurant and that it was just for the graduates. I was left standing in the university parking lot, in my blue dress and my tight, low-heeled shoes, watching my son drive away in one of his friend's BMWs without even a single glance back. That night, I celebrated his graduation alone, eating strawberry jello in front of the TV. Inside the box, I also found the receipts from when Daniel moved out, the apartment in Wicker Park that I helped him pay for because he needed to start his own life, a $5,000 security deposit that I got by selling Robert's engagement ring. Daniel never knew I sold that ring. I told him I had saved the money from my cakes. The furniture for his first apartment was on me, too. The sofa, the bed, the refrigerator, the washing machine. Another $10,000 that I earned working double shifts at a bakery in a fancy suburb where they treated me like I was invisible. "Mom, when I get married and have kids, you're going to live like a queen. I promise. Everything you're doing for me, I'll pay you back tenfold." Daniel had told me as I carried a heavy box of dishes into his new apartment. A promise he never kept. I also found the invoices for his wedding to Jessica, a 400-guest ceremony at the Naperville Country Club that cost me $50,000. Money I got by taking out a second mortgage on my house, the same house Robert and I had worked so hard to buy. Jessica wanted the most expensive of everything. The dress imported from Spain, the flowers flown in from Colombia, the 7-course meal prepared by a French chef, and I, like a fool, paid for every whim because I wanted my son to have the wedding of his dreams. At that wedding, Jessica sat me at table 7, next to some distant cousins I didn't know. Meanwhile, her parents were at the main table, right next to the bride and groom. When I asked Daniel why I wasn't at the head table, being his only direct family, he replied, "Mom, Jessica's parents brought the most guests. It's a matter of protocol." Protocol. As if I were just any other guest and not the woman who bled herself dry working to pay for that wedding. At the bottom of the box were the most recent receipts. The $5,000 I lent him 6 months ago for an important investment. The $3,000 from 4 months ago for Jessica's car that broke down. The $2,000 from last month for Sophia's school supplies at a very expensive school. There was always an urgency, always an emergency. And I always said yes, because I thought that one day he would thank me, that one day he would appreciate everything I had done for him. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by papers that were the evidence of a life dedicated to a son who had just told me I wasn't welcome at his Thanksgiving table. Each receipt was like a stab in the chest. Each invoice a testament to a love that had always been one-sided. I thought about Jessica, who had never worked a day in her life, who lived off Daniel's salary and my loans that were never repaid. Jessica, who saw me as a nuisance, as a woman from another era, who didn't understand modern ways. What modern ways? The one where you despise the mother who gave you everything? The one where you're ashamed of the woman who broke her back to give you an education she could never have? It started to rain outside. The drops hit my bedroom window like tiny reproaches falling from the sky. I lay on the bed without changing my clothes, with all the papers scattered around me. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry without holding back. I cried for the girl I had been, who dreamed of being a teacher but had to get married at 18 because that's what was expected. I cried for the young mother who raised her son alone, never going out to have fun or meeting another man. I cried for the woman who sacrificed so much that she forgot to live her own life. But most of all, I cried because I had just discovered that a mother's love can be the fiercest and the blindest love of all, and that sometimes, loving too much can make you the loneliest person in the world. The next morning was as gray as my mood. I woke up with swollen eyes and a throat raw from crying. As I was making my coffee with a hint of cinnamon, just as my mother had taught me, the phone rang. For a moment, my heart leaped, thinking it might be Daniel calling to apologize, to tell me it was all a mistake, that of course I was invited to Thanksgiving. It was my doctor. "Mrs. Miller, this is Dr. Martinez. Your test results came in. Could you come to the office tomorrow at 10 a.m. to go over them?" "Is everything all right, doctor?" I asked, feeling my blood run cold. "I'd rather speak with you in person, nothing to be alarmed about. But there are a few things we need to monitor." I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of my kitchen, the coffee mug trembling in my hands. My first instinct was to call Daniel, to tell him I had to see the doctor, that maybe I'd need someone to go with me. But I remembered his cold voice from the day before and put the phone back in the kitchen drawer. That day was my 58th birthday. I know because every year since Daniel was old enough to remember, I would buy myself a small cupcake from the corner bakery and sing happy birthday to myself in the bathroom mirror while I did my hair. A silly tradition, but it was mine. I waited all day for a call, a text, anything. At 9 p.m., when I had lost all hope, I sat in my living room with the untouched cupcake on the coffee table. I stuck a candle in it that I found in the linen drawer and sang to myself in a broken voice that was lost in the silence of my empty house. "Happy birthday, Helen," I whispered to myself. Many more to come, alone. That night, I checked Daniel and Jessica's Facebook page. It was a masochistic habit I'd developed over the past few years. They posted constantly. Brunches at expensive restaurants, trips to Florida that I had unknowingly financed, Sophia's perfect smile at her private school. I found a photo from that very day. Daniel and Jessica were toasting with champagne at a fancy restaurant downtown. Celebrating because life is good, Jessica had written. Not a word about my birthday. Not a word about the woman who had given them everything so they could toast in a restaurant I could never afford. 2 weeks later was Mother's Day. I put on my best blouse, did my hair carefully, and set the table for 3, just in case they decided to visit with Sophia. I bought flowers to decorate the living room and made pot roast, Daniel's favorite meal since he was a child. I waited from 8 in the morning until 9 at night. No one came. No one called. At 10 p.m., after I had cleared the table and put the food away in the refrigerator, Daniel sent me a WhatsApp message. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Hope you have a nice day. A rose." A single damn rose emoji was all I got for giving him life, for raising him alone, for sacrificing 30 years of my existence. I replied, "Thank you, honey. I love you both. Hope to see you soon." He never answered. The next month, I came down with gastritis. The stress and sadness had my stomach in knots. For 3 days, I couldn't even keep water down. I was throwing up yellow bile that burned my throat and left me too weak to get out of bed. I called Daniel on his cell. "Hello? Daniel, honey, it's me. I'm very sick. I haven't been able to eat anything in 3 days. Oh, Mom. Did you eat something that went bad? You know at your age you have to be more careful with food." "No, honey. I think it's stress-related gastritis. My stomach hurts so much and— Mom, I'm in a really important meeting. Can we talk later?" "But Daniel? We'll talk later. Take care of yourself." And he hung up. He never called back. I had to ask Carol, my neighbor, to take me to an urgent care clinic, where they gave me an IV and medication for the gastritis. Carol, my 70-year-old neighbor, treated me better than my own son. "Where's Daniel?" she asked as we waited in the emergency room. "He's very busy with work." I lied, because I was too ashamed to admit my son had emotionally abandoned me. Oh, Helen. Kids these days don't know how to appreciate their mothers. In my day, if a mother got sick, the whole family dropped everything to take care of her. She was right, but her compassion hurt more than my stomach. The last straw came in August, on Sophia's birthday. My granddaughter was turning 5, and I had spent weeks preparing a special gift for her. A hand-sewn rag doll with a little dress that matched one I had made for Daniel when he was little. I called Daniel to ask what time I could stop by to give Sophia her present. "What present, Mom?" "Well, Sophia's birthday present. It is her birthday, isn't it?" "Oh, right. Look, Mom, we're just having a small party here at the house, just with her friends from school, okay? But if you want, you can drop her gift off another day. I can't even say hello to her. She's my granddaughter, Daniel. She's just really excited with her friends, and we don't want her to get distracted. You know how kids are at that age. Daniel, I'm her grandmother. Not a stranger off the street." There was a long pause. Too long. "Mom, the truth is, Jessica thinks you're a little intense with Sophia, and we don't want to confuse her." "Intense? For loving her?" "It's not that. It's just, well, your way of being can be a bit suffocating sometimes. Jessica says kids need space to develop without emotional pressure from adults." Emotional pressure. That's what my daughter-in-law called a grandmother's love. "All right, Daniel, I understand." "Mom, don't take it personally." I hung up before he could finish the sentence. I stood there, holding the rag doll, feeling my soul break into pieces so small I didn't know how to pick them up. That afternoon, I looked at Daniel and Jessica's Facebook page again. There it was, Sophia's birthday party. A massive celebration in a rented event space with clowns, a bouncy castle, an elaborate candy buffet, and at least 50 kids running around. In the photos, Jessica's parents were holding Sophia, playing with her, smiling like the perfect grandparents I would never get to be. In one of the last photos, Sophia was opening presents. Expensive toys, tablets, new bikes. Underneath the photo, Jessica had written, "My princess surrounded by the love of her real family. Real family. As if I were a fake. As if the blood tie that connected me to that little girl was a lie my imagination had made up." I couldn't eat dinner that night. I went to bed early but couldn't sleep. I lay awake until dawn, staring at my bedroom ceiling, wondering at what point I had stopped being important to the people I loved most in the world. When exactly did I become the invisible woman? At what point did my mother's love transform into an annoyance to be avoided? The next day, I made a decision that would change everything. I Googled, how to know if your family is emotionally manipulating you. What I read that morning chilled me to the bone and opened my eyes forever. The articles I read that morning were like buckets of ice water. Signs of emotional manipulation in families. How to recognize psychological abuse from adult children. The used mother. When love becomes exploitation. Every paragraph I read felt like it was written about my life. The constant loans that are never repaid. The gradual exclusion from family events. The criticism disguised as advice. The constant guilt-tripping for expressing basic emotional needs. I poured another coffee and kept reading until the sun came up. For the first time in years, the pieces of my life started to form a clear and painful picture. That morning, as I was watering the patio plants that Robert had planted years ago, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Helen Miller? Yes, this is she. This is Maribel Sanchez, a preschool teacher at the Villa de Cortés school. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to confirm some information about Sophia Miller. My heart raced. Had something happened to my granddaughter? Is everything okay with Sophia? Yes, ma'am. She's perfectly fine. We're just updating our emergency contact records, and I have some conflicting information. The paperwork lists you as the paternal grandmother and secondary emergency contact. But her parents told me yesterday that you have no relationship with the family. I was speechless. Literally speechless. Ma'am? Are you there? Yes. Yes, I'm here. What paperwork is that? The registration forms from last school year. It says here that in case of an emergency, if we can't reach the parents, we should contact Helen Miller, paternal grandmother. But yesterday, when Sophia felt sick to her stomach and we couldn't locate her parents, Mrs. Miller told me that you were no longer a part of the child's life. My legs trembled so much I had to sit down in the patio chair. What happened with Sophia when she felt sick? Well, she stayed in the nurse's office until they picked her up at 5 p.m. It was almost 4 hours. The poor thing was crying because her tummy hurt, and she was asking for her grandma Helen. Sophia had been sick. My granddaughter had been sick and alone for 4 hours, asking for me, while I didn't even know there was an emergency. Ma'am, I am her grandmother, and I do have a relationship with her. I don't know why they told you that. Oh, Mrs. Miller, I'm so sorry. There was a lot of confusion. Should I keep you as an emergency contact then? Yes, please. I'm her grandmother, and I love her more than my own life. After hanging up, I sat on the patio for hours, processing what I had just discovered. They hadn't just erased me from family celebrations. They had erased me completely from my granddaughter's life, even when she needed me, when she was sick and scared. That afternoon, I took the L train to Daniel's office building in Naperville. I needed to confront him face to face. I needed to understand what I had done to deserve this treatment. The receptionist looked at me curiously when I said I was Daniel Miller's mother. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? No, but I'm his mother. It's urgent. One moment, please. I saw her speak quietly on the phone. She returned with an awkward smile. Mr. Miller says he's in a very important meeting and can't see you right now. He asks if you could come back another day with an appointment. An appointment. To speak to my own son. Tell him it's about Sophia. That it's urgent. Another call. Another whispered conversation. Ma'am, he says if it's about the child, you should speak directly with his wife. I left there feeling more humiliated than ever before in my life. My son had turned me away from his office like I was a door-to-door salesperson, but my humiliation was just beginning. That night, as I was eating dinner alone in front of the TV, I heard voices outside my house. I looked through the kitchen window and saw something that froze me with horror. Daniel and Jessica were standing on the sidewalk in front of my house with an unknown couple. The couple was holding a tablet and taking pictures of my house's facade. I went outside immediately. Daniel? What are you doing here? My son jumped as if he'd seen a ghost. Oh, hi, Mom. We didn't know you were home. I live here, Daniel. This is my house. What's going on? The unknown couple discreetly walked away, but I managed to hear the man say to the woman, It's a really well-located property. With a few renovations, it could be worth double. Who were those people? I asked, feeling my blood run cold. Jessica answered for Daniel. There's some acquaintances who are looking for a house in the area. We told them this is a very nice neighborhood. And why were they taking pictures of my house? Mom, they weren't taking pictures of your house specifically, Daniel lied, avoiding my gaze. They were looking at the houses on the block in general. A lie. I had clearly seen them focus on my facade, saw them jot something down on their tablet while pointing at my front door. Daniel, tell me the truth. What's going on? Nothing, Mom. Nothing's going on. We were just leaving. Wait, why did you tell Sophia's teacher that I don't have a relationship with you anymore? Why did you remove me as an emergency contact? Jessica's eyes filled with a cold fury that made me shiver. Because we don't want you confusing our daughter with your emotional dramas, Helen. You're 58 years old. It's time for you to get a life and let us live ours. Jessica, Sophia is my granddaughter. I have a right to— You have no rights. She cut me off with a verbal violence that left me breathless. The only rights to that child belong to Daniel and me. You've already raised your kid. You've done your job as a mother. Now leave us alone. Daniel didn't say a single word to defend me. He just stood there, staring at the pavement, while his wife tore me apart emotionally on my own doorstep. Daniel, I whispered, are you going to let her talk to me like this? He finally looked me in the eyes, and what I saw there was worse than any insult. Absolute indifference. As if I were a stranger who was bothering them. Mom, Jessica is right. I think you need to, I don't know, find your own hobbies. Make friends your own age. You can't keep depending on us emotionally anymore. Depending emotionally. As if loving my son and wanting to know my granddaughter was a mental illness. They left without another word, leaving me standing on my own sidewalk like a ghost in my own life. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, replaying every word, every gesture, every glance. For the first time in years, I could see with crystal clarity what had been happening. They were preparing to eliminate me completely from their lives. The acquaintances taking pictures of my house were no accident. My exclusion from family events was not temporary. Removing my name from Sophia's school records had not been a mistake. It was a plan, a systematic plan to make me disappear. At dawn, I called my cousin Kevin, the only family I had left besides Daniel. Kevin was a lawyer, and although we hadn't spoken much in years, we had always been on good terms. Helen? What a surprise to hear from you so early. Kevin, I need your help. I think Daniel is trying to take my house from me. What do you mean, take your house? Explain it to me. I told him everything, from the Thanksgiving exclusion to the pictures from the night before. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Helen, did you put Daniel down as the beneficiary on your legal documents? Well, yes. He's my only son. Everything I have is for him when I'm gone. And does he have power of attorney over your bank accounts? I gave it to him 2 years ago when I had the flu and couldn't get to the bank. Why? Another silence. Longer. More ominous. Cousin, we need to meet today, and you need to bring all your important papers. All of them. It was in that moment that I knew my nightmare was just beginning. My cousin Kevin arrived at my house at 2 p.m. with a black briefcase and a grim expression I hadn't seen on him since my mother's funeral. He sat at the dining room table, the same one where I had signed so many papers over the years without reading them completely, blindly trusting that my son would never hurt me. Helen, sit down, he said in his professional lawyer's voice. What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt. A lot. I placed my documents on the table. The deed to the house, the bank statements, the will I had made 5 years ago, all the power of attorney forms I had given Daniel without a second thought. Kevin reviewed every paper with a magnifying glass for nearly an hour. Occasionally, he would jot down notes, frown, and shake his head in disapproval. The silence grew heavier with each passing minute. Cousin, he said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. This is very bad. Very, very bad. What did you find? Daniel has absolute power over all your bank accounts. He can move your money without consulting you. He can sell your house without you signing a thing, because this document gives him complete authorization to manage all your assets in case of temporary or permanent incapacitation. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest with a hammer. But I've never been incapacitated. I've never had any mental health issues. It doesn't matter, Helen. With this document, he can argue anything, that you have dementia, that you're depressed, that you can't make rational decisions. And with 2 doctors' statements, he can have you committed and legally take everything you own. The room started to spin. I grabbed the table to keep from falling. Are you telling me my son can steal my house and put me in a nursing home? Legally, yes. And the worst part is, your will states that if you die or become incapacitated, he inherits everything immediately. The house, bank accounts, life insurance, everything. But Kevin, I trusted him. He's my son. I know, cousin. And he took advantage of that trust. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I went to bed early but didn't manage to sleep for a minute. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing the magnitude of my situation. My only son, the person I had given my entire life for, had been systematically planning to rob me and get rid of me. This wasn't just emotional neglect. It was premeditated fraud. The next day, I made the hardest and most liberating decision of my 58 years. I went to the bank to cancel all the powers of attorney I had given to Daniel. The bank manager, a young woman in her 30s, was professional, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes when I explained what I wanted to do. Mrs. Miller, are you sure you want to revoke all powers of attorney? Your son has been managing your accounts for 2 years without any issues. That's precisely why. I want to review every transaction he's made in my accounts since I gave him that power. That will take a moment. Can you wait? Half an hour later, the manager returned with several printed sheets and an uncomfortable expression. Ma'am, here are all the transactions. Did you authorize all of these transfers? I reviewed the papers with trembling hands. In 2 years, Daniel had withdrawn over $40,000 from my accounts. Transfers listed as maintenance expenses for Mrs. Miller or authorized medical expenses. Medical expenses? What medical expenses? I have insurance through Medicare. I couldn't tell you, ma'am. You would have to ask your son directly. I'm not asking him anything. I want you to cancel all powers of attorney immediately and change all my access codes. Do you also want to change the beneficiaries on your accounts and insurance policies? The question hit me like a slap. Of course I had to change the beneficiaries. Daniel was no longer my family. He was a stranger who had decided to rob me while I was dying of love for him. Yes. I want to change everything. I walked out of the bank feeling a mixture of terror and liberation I had never experienced before. For the first time in my adult life, I was the sole owner of my money, my decisions, my future. But the real moment of liberation came that afternoon, when Daniel called. His voice was desperate. Mom, what did you do? The bank called me and said you canceled my access to your accounts. That's exactly what I did, Daniel. I canceled your access. Why? What's wrong with you? I help you manage your money so you don't have to worry about those things. Help me? By stealing $40,000 from me? There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. What are you talking about, Mom? I've never stolen anything from you. I have the bank statements right here, Daniel. Every dollar you took from my accounts without asking. Authorized medical expenses. What medical expenses? Mom, those were family emergencies. Expenses that came up and you weren't available to ask. Lies. You've never had any family emergencies, and you never asked me because you didn't want me to know you were stealing from me. I'm not stealing from you. I'm your son. That money is mine too. There it was. The truth I had been denying for years. No, Daniel. That money is mine. I earned it by working since I was 18, and you are not my son. A son doesn't treat his mother this way. Mom, you're talking nonsense. You're losing your mind. I'm coming over so we can talk in person. No, you're not coming. And if you do, I won't open the door. What is wrong with you? Who's been putting these ideas in your head? No one is putting ideas in my head, Daniel. I just woke up. After 58 years of being asleep, I finally woke up. I hung up the phone with a sense of power I had never experienced. That night, I ate dinner alone, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. I made myself grilled cheese with tomato soup, poured a glass of iced tea, and ate slowly, savoring every bite without the knot in my stomach that had been my constant companion for years. Afterwards, I took a long bath with bath salts I had been saving for a special occasion. I put on a clean robe, poured myself a glass of the wine I had been saving for when Daniel visits, and sat in my living room to read a book I'd bought months ago, but never had time to open. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't watching the phone. I wasn't anxious about whether Daniel needed something, if he had an emergency, if he needed more money. I stayed up until 2 a.m. reading, simply because I could. Because it was my house, my time, my decision. The next day, I woke up without an alarm. I stayed in bed until 9 a.m, something I hadn't done since Daniel was a teenager and I was working double shifts to pay for his whims. I made my favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with sausage and fresh squeezed orange juice. I ate on the patio, watching the morning sun light up the bougainvillea that Robert had planted in the garden. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look for texts from Daniel. I didn't worry if there was a family emergency that required my money. For the first time in 30 years, my day belonged entirely to me. At 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel standing on my porch, his face a mask of anguish and desperation. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about, Daniel." "Please, Mom. I'm your son. You can't do this to me." "Do what? Protect my assets from someone who is stealing from me?" "I'm not stealing from you. I'm your family. My family wouldn't have excluded me from Thanksgiving. My family wouldn't have erased me from my granddaughter's emergency contacts. My family wouldn't have lied to me for years to steal my money. Mom, if you don't open this door, I'm going to have to take legal action." That threat was the best thing he could have said. It confirmed everything Kevin had explained to me about his true intentions. "Go ahead, Daniel. Take all the legal action you want. I have a lawyer now, too." He left, shouting that I was crazy, that I would regret this, that he had rights to my house and my money. But his shouts no longer scared me. On the contrary, they brought me a strange peace, because they confirmed that I had made the right decision. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No nightmares, no anxiety, no constant terror of not being good enough for the people I loved. I had started to love myself, and that changed everything. A week after I cut Daniel off, my phone started ringing nonstop. It wasn't just Daniel. It was a coordinated manipulation campaign so cruel and precise it left me cold. The first call was from Jessica at 7 a.m. "Helen, it's Jessica. We need to talk. Urgently." "What do we need to talk about?" "About what you're doing to Daniel. He's destroyed. He can't sleep. He can't work. He says his own mother is accusing him of being a thief. Because he is. He is not a thief. He's your son who worries about you. And you're repaying him with ingratitude and paranoia. Jessica, he stole $40,000 from my accounts. That's not worry. That's fraud. He used that money for family expenses. For Sophia's school. For the upkeep on your house. For things you needed but never asked for. For Sophia's school that I never authorized. For upkeep on my house that I never requested. With money he stole without my consent. Helen, you're not well. Daniel thinks you need psychological help." There it was. The threat disguised as concern. "Tell Daniel the only help I need is for him to stop stealing from me." I hung up, but I knew this was only the beginning. An hour later, my close friend Rosa, Daniel's godmother, called me. "Helen, sweetie, how are you?" "Daniel called me. He's so worried about you." "Hi, Rosa. I'm doing very well, thank you." "Oh, honey. But Daniel tells me you've been acting very strangely lately, that you took away his power of attorney without explaining why. He says he's very worried about your mental health." "My mental health? Rosa, did you know that Daniel stole $40,000 from my accounts?" "Stole? Oh, honey, don't say that. Daniel is a good son. Maybe he took that money for something important and just forgot to mention it. He forgot for 2 years, Rosa. Helen, at our age, we sometimes get confused. Maybe you told him he could use that money and now you don't remember." I was speechless. My own friend, a woman I'd known for 20 years, was suggesting I had dementia. "Rosa, I am perfectly sound of mind." "Of course you are, honey. But it's also normal at 60 to have some memory lapses. Daniel just wants to take care of you." 60. I was 58, but to her, I was already a senile old woman. Rosa, I think this conversation is over. Honey, don't be like that. I just want to help. I hung up without letting her finish. But the calls kept coming. My sister Clara from Phoenix. Helen, what are you doing to that poor boy? Daniel called me in tears. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor. Helen, your son came by to ask me if I'd noticed you acting strangely lately. He seems so worried about you. But even Father Michael from the parish. My child, Daniel came to ask me to pray for you. He says you need spiritual guidance. It was a systematic campaign to paint me as a mentally unstable woman. Daniel had contacted everyone I knew to plant seeds of doubt about my sanity. The last straw came on Friday afternoon. There was a knock at my door, and when I opened it, I found Daniel with a man in an elegant suit and a woman in a white coat. Hi, Mom. I'd like you to meet Dr. Ramirez and this social worker, Ms. Martinez. They're here to do an evaluation. What evaluation? I didn't request an evaluation. The doctor stepped forward with a smile that sent chills down my spine. Mrs. Miller, your son is very concerned about your well-being. We've received reports of erratic behavior, paranoia, frequent memory loss. Reports from whom? From family and friends who are worried about you. We just want to make sure you're okay. I am perfectly fine. And you are not coming into my house. Mom, don't be stubborn. It's for your own good. The social worker pulled out a folder. Ma'am, we have statements here from people who know you. Your daughter-in-law reports episodes of aggression. Your friend mentions mental confusion. Your sister notes paranoid behavior. Those are all lies my son told you to get you to come here. Mrs. Miller, denial is one of the first symptoms of cognitive decline. Get out of my house! All of you! Get out! Daniel stuck his foot in the door before I could close it. Mom, if you don't cooperate voluntarily, we'll have to get a court order. It was in that moment that something inside me snapped. 58 years of being the good one, the understanding one, the one who always gives in, evaporated in an instant. A court order? Seriously? I pulled out my phone and dialed the number Kevin had given me for emergencies. Kevin, it's Helen. They're here. Daniel brought a doctor and a social worker. They want to have me declared incompetent. Yes, come immediately. Then I dialed 911. I'd like to report an attempted home invasion and possible fraud. There are people at my door trying to enter my house with documents I believe are fake. The color drained from Daniel's face. Mom, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago, Daniel. Defending myself. Half an hour later, my house looked like a battlefield. Kevin had arrived with another lawyer. The police were there, verifying the credentials of the doctor and the social worker. Neighbors were peering out of their windows. Kevin examined the papers they brought, and his face turned red with indignation. This is complete fraud. This doctor isn't registered with the state medical board. The social worker has a fake ID, and this supposed evaluation order has no official seals. A police officer approached Daniel. Sir, you're going to have to come with us. Using false documents and impersonating a public official are felonies. Wait, I didn't know the documents were fake. They told me they were legitimate. The doctor and the social worker had already vanished into the crowd of onlookers. When everyone finally left, I was alone in my living room with Kevin. My hands were shaking with adrenaline and rage. Cousin, this is very serious. Daniel didn't just want to rob you. He hired con artists to have you declared mentally incompetent. What can I do, Kevin? First, we're going to sue him for fraud and attempted theft of property. Second, we are completely changing your will. And third, we're getting a restraining order so he can't come near you. But he's my son. No, Helen. A son doesn't do this to his mother. This isn't neglect or emotional manipulation anymore. This is a crime. That night, for the first time in my life, I locked every door and window in my house. Not because I was afraid of unknown burglars, but because I was afraid of my own son. The next day, Daniel showed up at my door at 6 a.m. He looked disheveled, with deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. Mom, please, let me explain. It was all a misunderstanding. There's nothing to explain, Daniel. Yes, there is. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just worried about your mental health. My mental health is perfect. What's sick is your heart. Mom, I love you. You're the most important thing in my life. Lies. The most important things in your life are my money and my house. That's not true. Then prove it. Give me back the $40,000 you stole. He was silent. Completely silent. You can't, can you? Because you already spent it. Because it was never for family emergencies. Because you stole from me to live a better life at the expense of my hard work. Mom. Don't call me Mom. Mothers are people you love and respect. You are not my son. You are a stranger who took advantage of my love for 30 years. You can't say that. Of course I can. And what's more, I'm going to tell everyone, the family, the neighbors, anyone who asks about you. If you do that, you will never see Sophia again. There it was. The final threat. The last bullet he thought would make me fold. Daniel, I haven't seen Sophia in months because of you. I have nothing left to lose. Mom, think about it. Be reasonable. Without me, you'll be completely alone. I looked him in the eyes one last time as if he were my son. Daniel, I've been alone for years. The only difference is that now I realize it. He left, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. But for the first time, his shouting and his threats didn't scare me. They gave me peace. Because I had finally learned that being alone by choice is very different from being alone because you've been abandoned. And that difference had saved my life. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Daniel, I woke up one morning and didn't recognize the woman looking back at me in the bathroom mirror. Not because she had aged, but because for the first time in decades, I saw something in my eyes that I had forgotten existed. Inner peace. I had woken up without an alarm, something that still felt strange after so many years of waking up with anxiety. I hadn't checked my phone for messages that never arrived. I hadn't planned my day around Daniel's potential needs. I hadn't felt that knot in my stomach that had been with me every morning for years. I was free, truly free. That morning I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I got dressed up for myself. I put on the navy blue dress I had bought for Daniel's graduation, the one he had completely ignored that day. I put on makeup carefully, not to impress anyone, but because it gave me pleasure. I did my hair the way I liked it, not how I thought others expected me to. I left my house and walked through the neighborhood as if seeing it for the first time. Carol Gable greeted me from her porch with a genuine smile. Helen? You look radiant. Did you do something different? Yes, Carol. I set myself free. What was that, dear? Nothing, Carol. Just having a good day. But she was right. I looked different. I walked different. I felt different. At the local farmer's market, where I had bought ingredients for years to cook for Daniel, I now bought only what I wanted to eat. Hot peppers to make a spicy salsa he disliked but I loved. Fresh flowers to decorate my table, because I deserved to have flowers in my house even if it wasn't a special occasion. Mr. Henderson, the spice vendor who had known me for 15 years, looked at me curiously. Hey, Mrs. Miller, how's your son? Haven't seen him with you in a while. Daniel doesn't live with me anymore, Mr. Henderson. Oh, good for him, starting his own life. But I bet he visits you often, right? I was quiet for a moment, feeling the automatic urge to lie, to protect Daniel's image as a good son. But something inside me rebelled against that habit. No, Mr. Henderson. Daniel decided I'm no longer part of his life. What do you mean, not part of his life? You're his mother. Being a mother doesn't mean you have to put up with being mistreated, Mr. Henderson. The man looked at me with a mixture of surprise and respect that I hadn't seen in years. You're right, Mrs. Miller. You're absolutely right. That afternoon, while preparing brisket for the first time just for myself, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Helen Miller? Yes, this is she. My name is Patricia Mendoza. I'm the director of the Rosario Castellanos Cultural Center. I was given your number because we were told you make extraordinary cakes. Who told you that? Brenda Ramirez, your close friend. She says you used to make the best specialty cakes in all of Oak Park. Brenda, my friend who sold flowers at the market and had tasted my cakes when I sold them to pay for Daniel's university. Oh, yes. I used to make cakes, but not anymore. Well, that's exactly why I'm calling. We're organizing a food festival for a Day of the Dead celebration, where we want to showcase traditional Mexican-American cuisine made by women in the community. Would you be interested in participating? A food festival. I hadn't cooked for anyone other than Daniel and Jessica in years, and they always found something to criticize. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've catered an event. Mrs. Miller, Brenda says you were an artist in the kitchen, and we want to give you a space to share that art with the community. That word, artist, hit me right in the heart. No one had ever called me an artist. I was just the mom who cooked, the woman who worked, the lady who baked cakes to survive. When is the festival? In 2 weeks. We would pay you for your participation, and you could also sell your cakes to the public. Okay, I'll do it. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen looking at my hands. The same hands that had kneaded thousands of cakes to keep Daniel in college. The same hands that had worked tirelessly for decades. But now, for the first time, they were going to create something for me. The following days were a revelation. I started baking again, but this time without the pressure of generating money for Daniel's emergencies. I cooked for pleasure, experimenting with flavors I had forgotten, remembering recipes from my mother and grandmother that I had abandoned because Daniel didn't like them. On the day of the festival, I arrived at the cultural center with 12 specialty cakes and 6 coconut cream pies. I had decorated each one with the care of someone falling back in love with their craft. The public's response left me speechless. People lined up to try my desserts. They congratulated me, asked for my recipes, and wanted to know if I took special orders. An older woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Ma'am, your cake reminded me exactly of the one my grandmother used to make back in Savannah. I haven't tasted anything that took me back to my childhood like that in years." A young chef from a trendy restaurant in the West Loop left me his card. "I'm very interested in working with you. Your flavors are authentic, not like all that molecular gastronomy that's in fashion. This is edible art. Edible art. That word again." That night, I came home with a handful of business cards, orders for private events, and more money than I had earned in months when I was working desperately to support Daniel. But more important than the money was how I felt inside. For the first time in my adult life, I felt valued for who I was, not for what I could give to others. The next day, I decided to do something I had dreamed of for years, but had never dared to do. I enrolled in a French class through the continuing education program at the local community college. I had always wanted to learn French. Since I was young, I was fascinated by the idea of traveling to Paris, of understanding French films without subtitles, of reading books in their original language, but I'd never had the time or money for such luxuries. The first class was terrifying. I arrived half an hour early, as nervous as a teenager on her first day of school. The classroom filled with men and women my age, all with similar stories, postponed dreams, passions abandoned for family responsibilities. "Bonjour, je m'appelle Hélène," I said for the first time in my life, and the teacher, a French woman in her 40s named Sylvie, smiled at me with genuine warmth. "Très bien, Hélène. Welcome to French class." Over the next few weeks, my life took on a completely new rhythm. My mornings were dedicated to developing my baking business. In the afternoons, I studied French, did my homework, and practiced my pronunciation in front of the same bathroom mirror where I had once seen a defeated woman. On weekends, I explored parts of Chicago I had never visited because I was always busy working or taking care of Daniel. I went to the Art Institute, Millennium Park, and took a boat tour on the river. Not as a worker rushing by, but as a tourist in my own city. One Saturday afternoon, while walking through Lincoln Park, I stopped in front of a travel agency. In the window was a huge poster of Paris, the Eiffel Tower lit up at night, the Champs-Élysées, the Louvre. I walked in without a second thought. "Good afternoon. I'd like some information on trips to Paris." The travel agent, a young woman who could have been my granddaughter, looked at me with surprise. "For how many people, ma'am?" "For one. Just for me." "And when are you looking to travel?" I thought for a moment. My French classes were going very well. My baking business was flourishing. For the first time in my life, I had money that was completely my own. "For December. I want to spend Christmas in Paris." How wonderful. Paris at Christmas is magical. As the agent explained packages and hotels, I felt an excitement I had never experienced. The thrill of planning something entirely for myself, something no one could ruin, criticize, or forbid. I left the agency with a Paris brochure in my hands and a smile so wide it made my face ache. That night, as I ate dinner alone on my patio under the stars, I thought of Daniel. For the first time in months, I didn't think of him with pain, but with a strange sense of gratitude. His betrayal, his abandonment, his cruelty, they had forced me to discover something I might never have found otherwise: my own worth. At 58 years old, I was finally learning to live for myself, and that, I thought, as I savored my glass of homemade iced tea, was the most valuable gift anyone had ever given me, even if that someone had been my greatest enemy disguised as my son. 6 months later, I'm writing this from a cafe in the Latin Quarter of Paris, with a cup of chocolate chaud between my hands and a perfect view of Notre Dame through the window. It's snowing lightly outside, and Parisians are walking briskly, wrapped in elegant coats that I had previously only seen in movies. My French has improved so much that yesterday I was able to have a full conversation with Madame Dubois, the owner of the small hotel where I'm staying. She told me she finds my Midwestern accent charmant, and that she's fascinated by my stories of traditional baking. Vous devez écrire un livre de recettes, Madame Helen, she told me at breakfast yesterday. You should write a cookbook. A cookbook. Me, who for decades considered myself just a woman who cooked out of necessity, now someone was suggesting I write a book. This morning, out of habit, I woke up and checked my phone. I had 3 text messages. The first was from Patricia, the director of the Cultural Center, asking when I was coming back because they had a backlog of orders for my cakes. My small business had grown so much that I now have a waiting list. The second was from Sylvie, my French teacher, sending me a photo of the class holding a sign that read, Nous pensons à Helen à Paris. We're thinking of Helen in Paris. My classmates had become a chosen family that celebrated my triumphs as their own. The third one surprised me. It was from a number I didn't recognize at first, but when I opened the photo it contained, my breath caught in my throat. It was Sophia, my granddaughter, older, prettier, smiling in front of a homemade birthday cake that Jessica clearly had not made. Below the photo was a message from a different number. Hi, Grandma Helen, it's Sophia. I found your number in Dad's old phone. I turned 6 and I wished you could come to my party, but Mom says you're very far away. Is it true you live in Paris like the princesses in the fairy tales? I love you and I miss you so much. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, tears streaming down my cheeks. My granddaughter hadn't forgotten me. Despite all of Daniel and Jessica's efforts to erase me from her life, she remembered me. But for the first time, that memory didn't fill me with despair, but with a strange peace. Sophia was okay. She was growing up. And one day, when she was older, she could make her own decisions about who she wanted in her life. I replied, Hello, my love. Yes, I am in Paris, and it's very beautiful, but not more beautiful than watching you grow. I love you so much, and I hope to see you soon. Tell me about your school and your friends. The conversation lasted all morning. Sophia told me she had learned to read, that her favorite subject was math, that she had a best friend named Isabella, and that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She sent me drawings she had made at school, pictures of her room, and videos of her singing songs I didn't know. It was like getting to know a whole new person who carried my blood. Around noon, the conversation stopped abruptly. I assumed Jessica had discovered Sophia was talking to me. Part of me felt sad, but another part was filled with hope. My granddaughter had sought me out on her own. That meant the love we had shared in her early years hadn't disappeared. It was just dormant. That afternoon, I walked along the Champs-Élysées, thinking about all the paths that had brought me here. Daniel's emotional abandonment that had awakened me from a life of servitude. Jessica's manipulation that had taught me to set boundaries. The financial betrayal that had forced me to value my own work. The campaign to have me declared incompetent that had shown me my own mental fortitude. Every wound had been a lesson in disguise. Every rejection had been a door closing so that another could open. I went into a small bookstore near the Louvre and bought a red leather notebook with blank pages. On the first page, I wrote, Recipes from the Heart, The Kitchen of a Free Woman, by Helen Miller. So if I was going to write a cookbook, it would be about much more than food. It would be about a woman who learned that her hands were not just for giving, but also for creating beauty for herself. Last night, I went to dinner alone at an elegant restaurant near the Eiffel Tower. The waiter treated me with the courtesy reserved for important guests, without asking if I was waiting for someone else, without making me feel that a woman dining alone was strange or pathetic. I ordered coco vin and a glass of red wine. While I waited for my food, I watched the couples at the other tables. Some looked happy, sharing laughs and lively conversation. Others looked bored, staring at their phones instead of each other. A few were arguing in low voices, with tense gestures that reminded me of my last years of marriage to Robert. For the first time in my life, I didn't envy any of those couples. I didn't feel like I was missing anything by being alone. On the contrary, I felt I had something many of them didn't: the absolute certainty that I liked my own company. When my food arrived, I raised my wine glass in a silent toast. To Helen Miller, I whispered to myself, to the woman who finally learned to love herself. This morning, my last in Paris, I woke up early and went for a walk along the Seine. The rising sun turned the water into a golden mirror, and the first morning joggers began their routines. I sat on a bench facing the cathedral and took out my phone to do something I never thought I would do. I recorded a video for my social media. Me, who had never had more than 20 followers, decided to share my story. Hi, I'm Helen and I'm 58 years old. 6 months ago, my son told me not to come to his Thanksgiving dinner because I was no longer welcome in his life. Today, I'm having croissants in Paris, with a thriving business waiting for me at home and plans to write a cookbook. Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones that push us toward the life we truly deserve. I uploaded the video and put my phone away. I didn't care if 10 people or 10,000 saw it. I had done it for me, to close a chapter, to mark the end of a woman who begged for love and the birth of a woman who gave it freely, starting with herself. Tomorrow I return to Chicago, but I am not the same woman who left. I'm returning as someone who discovered that chosen solitude is freedom, that self-love is the only guaranteed love, and that it's never too late to start living for yourself. A year ago, Daniel told me I had already fulfilled my function as a mother. He was right, but not in the way he thought. My function as the mother who sacrifices herself until she disappears was over. Now, my function as the woman who chooses her own happiness was beginning. And that function, I'm sure, is just getting started. As I write these last lines in my Parisian notebook, I wonder if Daniel will ever realize what he lost. Maybe, maybe not. It's no longer my concern. What I know is that Sophia will grow up with the example of a grandmother who loved herself enough to save herself, and that, I believe, is the best inheritance I can leave her. In the end, I learned that sometimes the greatest show of love for our children isn't to give them everything, but to teach them that no one has the right to mistreat us, not even them. I closed my notebook, finished my chocolate chaude, and walked out of the cafe and into my new life. A life where I am the protagonist of my own story, not a secondary character in someone else's. A life where finally, after 58 years, I learned that I deserve love, starting with my own. Have you ever experienced something similar? Or do you know someone who has been through a situation like this? I'd love for you to share it in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Maybe these words will reach the person who needs to hear them most today.